Hello, good afternoon. Those of you who have joined us for our third and final Tech Chat series of 2023. Again, I'd like to welcome Clément, who's been a very familiar face in our last two sessions that we have. But today we have Iris. Iris is located on our Belgium office. Just very quickly, she has a long history around SAP MII. But within the last year, she's been working on a digital manufacturing project and actually been using some of her, let's say, her shop floor automation and integration skills that she'd learned in MII and using that cross knowledge into doing something very, very similar in DM. And we'll understand some of her experiences through some of the questions we will ask her as we go through. So in terms of this particular series, you want to talk about how do we connect, let's say, our cloud world. So how do we collect our systems in the cloud and connect them to our physical systems and our assets on the shop floor? So how do we connect the cloud to our physical shop floor assets? And why do we do that? Well, when we deploy the MES solution, we may want to perform transactions where we want to have no operator interaction whatsoever. Okay, for example, collecting downtime or non-conforming reason codes, events from the asset, which then automatically updates the MES system with data. Okay. So Clément, so our first question is to you. As always, you have the first question, right? So coming back to my question, how do we actually connect the cloud to the physical asset on the shop floor in terms of collecting data directly from the tag, from the PLC?
Sure. Thank you for the introduction, Martin. So indeed, to connect the physical assets to SAP DM, first we would configure the digital twins. So the digital twins correspond to the shop floor assets, the equipment that we will configure within SAP DM. And for that, we'll be using the production connectivity model. That's the first step. Then we will enable the machine data integration. And for that, we'll be creating service providers. So we connect the production connectivity model created before to the tags from an external data source. Then, in order to manage this flow of data, we will configure the production processes, so the PPDs. If you have watched our other tech chat, you should know about it already. And those production process designs, they are connected to model the production processes and translate the logic into configurations. We deploy them then into the production connector or SAP plant connectivity. We will discuss later about those two. And then we need to execute those processes. And to do so, the production connector or SAP plant connectivity is the one executing the processes as configured and transmitting the data between the machines and SAP DM. So these are the four, let's say, main bricks that are involved in communication between the physical assets and SAP DM. You're on mute, Martin.
Sorry, guys. Sorry for that. So yeah, so just to kind of quickly summarize, effectively in DM, we have our digital twin. So that's the asset, the information, the tags and the data we want to collect and push down via the PPD. And then we have then PICO or plant connector, production connector, sorry, which is then connecting to the asset to then pull that data from the automation layer. Okay, that's clear. Iris, next question is for you. So you have a lot of experience in the world of MII. As we put it earlier on, you now in a DM project, DM implementation cycle, right? So my question to you is, if you're an MII or an ME customer, you're very, very familiar with SAP plant connectivity or PICO for short. Is there any differences when you're using PICO, but now plant production connector with DM?
Yes, yeah. So the main difference is if you use SAP Pico with SAP MII or ME, you will have to do all your configurations in the SAP Pico Management Console, which is the user interface of Pico. So when I'm talking about doing configurations in Pico, I'm talking about configuring the source system. That's your data source. So that's the system that provides the information from the shop floor. It could be, for example, an OPC server. You have to configure a destination system. That's, for example, an MII application. And you have to configure your agent instances. These are services in Pico that establish a specific data flow between your source system and your destination system. For example, you can have an agent instance that sends a notification to your MII application whenever a certain value on an OPC server changes. So with SAP MII and ME, all this configuration is done in the SAP Pico Management Console. And as a consequence, you cannot see or change from your SAP MII environment which source systems or notifications are configured. This is different when you use Pico with SAP DM. So as Clément explained, SAP DM allows you to create a digital twin of your assets, so you can configure all your source systems and subscriptions from the SAP DM user interfaces. From there, you will deploy them to Pico. This means you can no longer change them in Pico, but yeah, you can really see and configure everything from one environment, from your SAP DM environment. And on top of that, it's also possible to start and stop your SAP Pico agent services from the SAP DM user interfaces instead of having to use the management console.
Okay, so thanks, Iris. So from what I understand from that, then it's basically is that within DM you manage the whole life cycle of how you effectively get data from that tag, right? So no longer do you have to be in, let's say, your host system and then in Pico, right? In Pico, right? Any longer, it's all just managed in one environment. So it's very much easier for simplicity and easy for the user. Thank you. So come over to you, right? We've been involved in SAP DM since 2019. We've gone for a number of project implementation cycles, and when we first started, we were using SAP Pico, right? But with our newer projects, we're starting to use the production connector. So, so can you explain why this is the case?
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. Since 2023, since November 2022, in fact, SAP is reshaping SAP Cloud Connectivity into a new application called Production Connector. And this new application is taking over the cloud integration functions of Pico. So new developments for cloud integration are being provided for the Production Connector only. So it means that no more releases, no more updates will occur on plant connectivity. That's why SAP is strongly recommending to use now Production Connector for new integration project. And if you are using right now a plant connectivity on your project, you should be migrated. You should migrate, to the Production Connector as soon as possible, so that we can benefit from all the continuous enhancements that are currently done and delivered on Production Connector. Pico will remain maintained, don't worry, till 2028 at least. But future DM release will not be compatible with the latest Pico version. So right now, you can create already the following shop floor system in Production Connector. So OPCUA, IP21 server, OPCDA server, HDA server, Asset Framework, Prophecy Historian server. So already some most of the sources that we are using on our project, and Pico will be decommissioned. So new features will only be available on Production Connector.
Okay, thanks, Clément. That's clear. But I think as customers, as Clément says, there's no urgency, right? But if you are thinking of deploying DM in your new projects, you should be moving to the latest application. in terms of that data acquisition on the shop floor using the production connector. Okay, so Iris, your next question is, I'd like to talk about a couple of project use cases, right? So we're currently working on a tier 1 automotive project where what we call there is a very lightweight touch for the operator pod, meaning that events like start, stop, changeover, product A, product B, traceability data such as dimensional values, which are read by an optical scanner, or tag values are being pushed into the operator pod, right? Can you please explain how we've been able to achieve this?
Sure, yeah. So yeah, I'll give you a specific use case for from that project. That customer, it has some machines that are measuring all sorts of things from the items that they're manufacturing. These machines, well, they are connected to a master PLC that is in turn connected to an OPC UA server. So on this OPC UA server, the machines are publishing all the measurements in OPC tags. And what we want to do in DM, we want to receive those tags, we want to store them in DM, show them to the operator, and we also want to confirm to the machines that we received those measurements well. So how did we achieve this in SAP DM? First of all, we had to set up a connection between our SAP DM application and our on-premise SAP Pico installation. We used the cloud connector in the middle to connect these two components in a secure manner. After the connection was set up, we created a shop floor system in SAP DM, which represents the OPC UA server. Secondly, we created the digital twin that Clément was talking about earlier. We did that by creating assets that represent the machines, and then something we call indicators. So indicators in SAP DM, they represent the OPC tags that are published on the OPC server. We can then group those indicators that are functionally related to each other into structures. So we have different structures for different kinds of measurements. And then we assign these structures to the relevant assets. The next thing we did is we create a production process design. So that Clément also mentioned, these are some kind of scripts that we use in SAP DM to automate certain actions. In this case, the production process would store the measurements that we receive from the OPC server and yeah, send a reply to the machine to say that we stored those messages. We also have to create an object to trigger the execution of that production process design. For this use case, we use a trigger object of type subscription. What that means is in DM, you will configure an object and you will say, if this OPC tag gets this value, I want to get these and these measurements I want to receive them in SAP DM. And then I want to trigger this script to store those measurements. Yeah, so after we configured that object in SAP DM, like I said, you don't have to configure it anymore in the management console because you can just deploy them from SAP DM directly into Pico. Yeah, and after that, we can just test our developments by using Kepler Simulator to change the value of the OPC tags, and then we can see how the measurements are stored automatically in SAP DM, and the machine gets a confirmation that the measurements are stored from DM. Finally, we also wanted the operator to see the measurements that we stored in the production operator dashboard in their pod. And to do this, we could just use a standard data collection plugin from SAP DM.
Okay, that's a very complete explanation, Iris. I appreciate that, so thank you. So yeah, very, very, very interesting. So we're able to use a standard plugin, right, in the operator pod to hold the data. And effectively, by having production process and building the digital twin, we could then capture that information via an OPC server directly from the tag related to the asset. Okay, that's clear. And that's just one example, isn't it? We've got many other examples that we can do that thing. Once you understand how you can get that access to that signal, then the world's your oyster in terms of how you use that within the execution within the pod. Okay. Clément, we are coming to our final question. So question for you is, there is the concept of the line monitor, right, within SAP DM. Would we be using the same approach as Iris described to display live tag data within the line monitor pod?
Indeed, SAP released in the we released in the 2311 a new version of SAP DM, what we call the live tag, and yeah, it simplifies a lot the setup on our side, because they introduced with this the notion of post last indicator value service and the last indicator value plugin for the line monitor pod. So these two features allows to post values triggered by a certain event like start, stop, complete from machine, for instance, or even scheduled using a timer through a production process design in SAP DM, and have it displayed on the line monitor using this last indicator value plugin directly. So it's really straightforward to configure and enrich this line monitor with almost live values coming from the machine directly. And you can imagine all the use cases for the business to have near real-time information from PLC, like on-done, like values from measurement coming from the PLC, and it's really interesting to see this new announcement coming.
Okay, thanks, Thomas. So to give context to business use case, effectively, we could have a big screen in the production office, for example. We could have a schematic of the production line, highlighting, let's say, the key resources which we're measuring, and then we can have some values like downtime, temperature, pressure, as an example. With those last value tags, we can put some context to that in terms of what order we're running, so we can get a real good indication of what's happening in terms of, let's say, that digital display of what's actually happening in the shop floor. Okay, so thanks for that. So I'd just like to start off by thanking Iris and Clément for your input today, as this is our final Tech Chat series of this year. I'd also like to thank our audience and those of you who attended the whole series. And actually, there has been a number of individuals and companies which have been following our whole journey across these three webinars that we have been conducting. My final comment really is to say, if you have any questions or would like to discuss in more detail the topics that we have spoken about, or even if you want to be able to understand how what's the starting point to move from your MII and ME landscape to SAP Digital Manufacturing, please don't hesitate to contact us at info@index.com, and to talk to where we can just reach out to us, talk about your specific use case. And to finish this off, I'd like to thank our marketing team, Emma, who's been in the background helping us to pull all of this together. So thanks, Emma. And with the holidays coming up, have some great holidays in a few weeks' time. And next year, we may be running another series for next year, going over a number of different content. So thanks a lot. And thanks again for attending. Cheers. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.